So this year's theme, we've heard it, you've seen it everywhere. Our friends at Newfields have made it possible, the art and nature of fun. And if you think about art, what I'd like you to do this evening is just expand your mind a bit, the definition of what art is. Art is all around us. Art is in every one of us, and art is what inspires us. Well, tonight we have something special. Tonight we're going to dig into the art of leadership. Tonight we're joined by 4 chief executives of this state. 4 men who have left an indelible mark, not just on this institution, not just on the great Indiana State Fair, but on this state, on this nation, and on this world. Let's welcome to the stage the 51st Governor of Indiana, Eric Holcomb. Our 50th Governor, Vice President Mike Pence. Our 49th Governor, a guy with a great first name, Mitch Daniels. And our 46th Governor, Senator Evan Bayh. Now, this is the first time, I believe, that all 4 of these men have been on stage together. And it's only right that the person to lead this discussion is someone who has worked for all of them and someone who is celebrating her 36th year at the Great Indiana State Fair. Please help me welcome the best executive director of any state fair anywhere in this country, Cindy Hoy.
Welcome, everyone. Great to see so many friends out in the audience, and thank you again so much for being willing to do this and talk about the art of leadership. And boy, let's just get right into it, okay?
I heard this was a roast.
Now, Mike McDaniel would be in charge of that. That's not Cindy Hoy's job, yeah. So the first thing I really want to talk about is I think about the art of leadership and think about leadership as the ability to motivate and inspire others. But I'm going to kind of divide these up. And so I'm going to start with Senator Bayh. So how would you define the art of leadership?
Given Congress's job approval rating these days, Cindy, it's Governor Bayh, thank you.
Okay, here we go. Wish me luck. All right, so Governor Daniels, would you like to describe the art of leadership?
You can't get out of it that easy. Let's hear it, Evan. Come on.
I tried. I'm sorry for interrupting, Cindy. Go ahead.
No, you go right ahead. So the art of leadership, how do you think of that?
Well, it's one of those things that you recognize it when you see it. It's hard to study it academically in the abstract and that sort of thing. But given what's going on in our country today and in the world today, I guess I would think the most important aspect of leadership, with all the acrimony and the divisiveness and so forth, is the ability to build bridges, to bring people together, to reconcile differences for the common good, for practical objectives. And that seems to be something that I think the 4 of us have always valued. I think here in Indiana we've always valued it. But perhaps nationally it's a vanishing art of some kind. So it's always easy to tear things down or to attack and that sort of thing, but it's much harder to build up. And so I think ultimately, there are a lot of other things you can say about leadership: attracting good people, motivating good people, hopefully setting a good example with the right values, all those sorts of things. But I really think, look how diverse the audience is here today. Bringing folks together and realizing we have more in common. If we work together, there's a lot we can get done. And realizing you can't make the perfect the enemy of the good, right? There's the final thing I'll say is, and I don't want to become senatorial by going on and on. It used to be back, I go back, to my father's time, and hopefully my own and my 3 colleagues and friends here. The words principled compromise. Both of those words are important. You got to maintain your principles, but at the same time, you got to realize you don't ever get everything you want. I don't know any family or business or academic institution that works that way. From time to time, you got to compromise a little bit to move the ball down the field. And so I think that's a part of leadership too.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, Governor Daniels.
Huge question. Just to try to distill it down, amen to everything Evan just said. I always thought it started with the why question. You ought to be able to tell yourself, why do I want to do this? What big things, how are we going to make life better, the state better, this business stronger? And if you could define that, and then I always said the next step was to be able to paint a picture. Try to get others, to show others big goals, and try to get them as excited as presumably you are about that. Always force the action. I used to talk about it all the time. Remembering getting yelled at as a mediocre high school infielder, Daniels, you let the ball play you. Play the ball. Move forward on things all the time. And, try always to make things happen. And when that can become a self-reinforcing process. One success can lead to another. I always resisted the conventional metaphor. People say, oh, you have to be careful how you spend political capital. And I always said, I don't think it necessarily works that way. Capital is something you invest. And if you make the right investments, it brings a return. It means you've got more capital to try the next thing. And that was sort of the philosophy we tried to bring to the job here. And as Evan says, the essential element is somehow recruiting, motivating, succoring, good people to come with you.
So thank you so much. We have an extraordinary leadership represented on the stage tonight. And to get elected and to accomplish your goals as governor requires tremendous leadership. And Vice President Pence, I just want to, who do you admire? And I'll use Governor Daniels. What is the why? Who do you admire and why? From a leadership standpoint.
Go ahead.
No, Vice President Pence.
Oh, is this to me?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Well, first off, how great is the Indiana State Fair? Am I right? We just, it's one of the reasons why it's so great for Karen and me to be back home again. We, being invited to the Harvest Dinner tonight, we came out earlier today just so we could hit the Pioneer Village and the Midway and everything else. I did hear, I'm not spreading rumors, but I heard that a former First Lady did come in second in the milking contest today, and is a little sensitive about that. Being a or came in first. Thank you for the correction. I think the key to I really believe leadership is one of the gifts that God can give us. When you look at Scripture, it talks about there are different gifts that people have, gifts of administration, gifts of leadership, but I also believe that, like athletic prowess, you can be born with natural talent, but if you don't invest in and discipline yourself and learn and grow and take risks and learn lessons and learn humility along the way, that you'll miss the opportunity to be in leadership. So for me, it begins with appreciating where that gift comes from, where that calling comes from. I think all four of us on this stage have lived out that calling and been privileged to serve Indiana in various capacities in that regard. And but for me, it's always been about investing in. When I became governor, one of the first things I did, because when you're a member of Congress, and you already put down Congress pretty effectively, Evan, I appreciate that.
It doesn't take much work, Mike.
No, it doesn't actually. I used to tell people, I was a member of Congress for 12 years, then I became a governor. And when I became governor, the morning after I was elected, I went by and saw Governor Daniels, and one of my favorite pictures in my study at home is him handing me a tape measure that I still have, and I not getting his sense of humor all the time. What's this? And he says, start measuring the curtains. So But people asked me, they said, what was the learning curve like when you went from Congress to being a governor? And I said, I don't remember a curve. It was straight up. Because, Cindy, when you're a congressman or to a senator or a legislator, and a great respect for legislators in the room, I always held the view that your job was to get up every morning and be right about your opinion, right? I mean, be faithful to what you told people you were going to stand for. When you're a governor, and I think it's reflected in both the comments that Evan and Mitch just made, when you're a governor, you have to figure out what the most right thing is that you can get done and bring people together around accomplishing. And that's a different task altogether. And it was something that I had to invest in and focus on and learn. And one of the things that I did with my entire cabinet when I became governor is I handed out copies of Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, because not trying to flatter my predecessor, but Indiana had made great progress and great strides when I came in after 8 years of Governor Daniels. And I saw that book as a great way of saying, how do we go from good government to taking Indiana, to borrow your phrase, to the next level? But it's all about studying, and it's about having the right people around you that are committed to improving.
Thank you. All right, Governor Holcomb, who has influenced your leadership?
Well, it's a long list. I mean, how far do you want to go back?
How about one?
One?
Okay, two.
Yeah. I would say different individuals have had a profound impact on my life at different points of my life. I worked for one of these guys for 10 years of my life in one capacity or another, and I worked for another one on this stage for, it felt like 10 days or 10 minutes. It was a very quick turn of events. And they have both had an influence on my outlook, and as just pile on, I think I wake up every day and think about progress. That's not some pursuit of rhetorical perfection, but progress. Like if you're heading in the right direction and you can continue to build upon that, it's amazing how far and how fast you can go when you're doing it with others. But I would trace it back to pre-government life, probably to a couple commanders or admirals in the United States Navy, quite honestly. That's where I was never a pilot, but that's where I started to fly straight in life and learned about attention to detail, really attention to detail, having an organization, having a mission, building a team, trying to realize this vision that you cast, and then measuring and seeing where you're at. And if you fall short, having the courage to collect yourself and learn from your shortcomings to try to, again, pursue that progress. So credit the Navy, even though my scores might not have reflected that at the time.
Okay, Senator Bayh, what or who inspired your leadership style?
Well, I would go back, as a matter of fact, to this very place here. My father had a big impact on me. He was a man I loved and admired, and he could have done any number of things. He was, when I was born, we were still living in Cherokseeville on the farm, but he went back. He got off to a good start, Mitch, with Purdue, and then he went a little astray going down to Bloomington for his law degree. But no one's perfect, right? He cared about other people and not just himself. And that sense of selflessness was something I always admired in him. I learned from my late wife the meaning of love and courage in the face of really terrible adversity. And I like to read history. She always liked to read novels and that sort of thing. I always read history. And I think back to Abraham Lincoln, who we all like to think spent his formative years, right? Born in Kentucky, but his formative years right here in Indiana. I mean, to lead our country through a civil war, to end slavery, to, ultimately lay down his own life in that cause. Fast forward, Martin Luther King, who, I got a book of his speeches once, he said the most important thing about any of us is not the color of our skin, but the content of our character. That's a pretty profound sentiment that I admire. But I think the final thing I'd say, it was always a formative experience for me when our sons were young. For any of you who haven't had a chance to go, I admire people, governor who served in the military. Both my sons, one became a Marine, there you go, and one went into the Army. And we took them when they were young to the cemetery at Normandy. And for any of you who have a chance to go, I would recommend it. Row after row of crosses and stars of David. And it was a clear day, and the flag was flapping in the breeze, and we walked down the rows of crosses until we found a cross that had the name of Indiana on it. And there was the date of the birth, the date of the death, home state, and he was a private. He was 18 years old. And I said to my sons, this young man was only just a little bit older than you. And he gave his life, not only for our country, but for the cause of freedom and the cause of liberty. And so whenever I go to, whether it's Arlington or Walter Reed or that cemetery in Normandy, I always ask myself, what can we do to be worthy of them? What can we do to justify their sacrifice and their confidence in us? And if we keep that as our North Star, I rather think we'll do okay.
That's powerful. Thank you for that. So, Governor Daniels, what did it feel like your first day in office as a governor?
It started right here. This place was jammed to the rafters, including the entire floor. The podium, the bandstand was down at that end. And no, very memorable. I'm sure each of us had the same idea. I wanted to demonstrate we're getting off to a fast start. So after the ceremonies, and I maybe a little histrionically ended the speech having said, all the things I thought we needed to do to get this state moving. I used an agricultural metaphor, if I recall right. I said, we need a barn raising. We need everybody doing what they can do in the old Indiana tradition of pitching in. Anyway, I remember finishing and saying, and now if you'll excuse me, I have to go to work. And that was supposed to be my exit line. I was, headed out, had this, all these orders I was going to sign. One of them, by the way, created the first Department of Agriculture in the state's history, which was somehow we had overlooked, and a bunch of others, and I was going to take a pile of bills to the desk of the Senate and the House, let's get going. But before I could go, right in front of the stage was a favorite outfit of mine, the Jasper Newton Community Band. Or if you're in Kentland, the Newton Jasper Community Band, which I had run into early on, and in the campaign, no one knew who I was. I found out they were having a practice, wanted to see it. I go up there, and they had me pretend to conduct a Sousa march. And at the end, a gal named Dixie over in the saxophone section goes, "If you get elected governor, can we play at your inaugural?" So I was a pretty green politician at that point, but I knew the answer to that. And there they were. They played at both of them, actually. And so I was trying to get out of here and go do, launch my first day. But they insisted I come down and conduct one of the Sousa marches before I could leave. So that's that and the things we did to try to, generate a fast start, say things are different. But it all started right here.
On the dirt. Yeah, I love that. Okay, so each of you came into office with special goals, or we call them pillars today, don't we, Governor? Each of you wanted to accomplish something big with your administration. So name one big accomplishment that you are most proud of that moved Indiana forward, and then maybe a tactic that you use to drive change. And I'm going to go down the line because I think this is really important to hear from each one of you. So we'll start with Governor Holcomb.
Well, first, on my first day, I left here as well, and I have the picture to prove it. This is the last time we four were together from this very room and building. And on my way, I was equally, had the adrenaline going and in high gear, but I stopped at McDonald's. Because I remember my wife and I talked about, like the night before, even though we had had some experience on the other side of the desk, we had not had the experience on the sitting behind it. And we talked about not only the incredible opportunity and privilege that the assignment would bring, but we also talked about the temptation, or maybe a temptation, to allow the job to change who we were in our core. And we talked about how we would hold each other accountable to not let that happen. So in the spirit of keeping it real, I stopped at McDonald's, went inside, high-fived everybody, because that's kind of what I do, and then went downtown and got busy on the agenda and the budget, because it happened so fast, so abruptly, even though you've got a few weeks to prepare. And one agenda has led to the next, so there is a cadence to it, and there is a tempo and kind of a tone to each season or each year, whether it be a budget year or not. And I would say that asking for one is impossible, because you do so much with so many that there are priorities on different fronts, whether it be community development or workforce development or infrastructure or economic development. One that I'll always cherish, and maybe the strategy that you asked about just very quickly, is post-COVID, we introduced Indiana's approach to improving local health departments, not just in funding, but addressing some of the fronts where we were lagging behind others. And it was creeping into everything else we were trying to do, whether it has to do with education or economic development. And so we went there when some said don't. And it was all because we worked from the ground level up. So people they literally volunteered to be part of this. And I'm just proud that all 92 counties are part of this new, improved statewide health network.
That's awesome. Congrats. Vice President Pence? Yeah.
Well, if I can break training for 1 second, Cindy, and just say about First Ladies. And Susan Bayh has already been remembered here. And I think, Evan, you should just know we all still love her, and we just appreciate so much her service and the way that she served the people of Indiana in such an extraordinary way. But also, I thought I'd invite people, because there's actually 3 First Ladies here. Sherry Daniels, Karen Pence, and First Lady Janet Holcomb. They could probably give a wave or stand up, and because I can tell you, none of us could have accomplished a fraction of what we've accomplished without these extraordinary women at our sides. So thanks for that. I would say to you, and I remember that day of your inauguration. I don't know what happened with mine. You had one here at the Coliseum too. They made me take my oath of office outside the State House. It was like 0 degrees. You were there. I remember that, and yeah, you were there too. But it was, which I always tell people, it kind of made sense, because a lot of people said it'd be a cold day before I ever became governor. But for me, when I think back about those 4 years for me, because I'm the only one up here that was a one-term governor, and I'm a little self-conscious about that, to be honest. But for me, the various things I was thinking about when I saw that question coming over, the kind of tax relief and reforms and investments in education reform, expanding educational choice and opportunities. But there was an idea that was a brilliant idea. I can say it was brilliant in my administration because it wasn't mine. But as my other 3 fellow governors know, when a brilliant idea comes from someone in your administration, it's your idea. And there was this notion that we made a small deposit in our time, but frankly, Governor Holcomb has built it out to a national model, and the idea of a regional cities initiative and approach. It was, being great Hoosiers, we're used to competing across county lines, right? Especially during sectionals. And so getting Bartholomew County to think cooperatively with Shelby County was not the easiest thing in the world to do. And so my team at the Economic Development Corporation came to me and said, how about we went to these great leaders in the legislature and said, what if we marshaled public and private resources to encourage communities to think and plan regionally, economically. And what began with the tens of millions of dollars of investments, Governor, I won't put you on the spot, but you told me recently has marshaled
$22 billion.
$22 billion in investments that have created jobs across Indiana. So,
thank you.
yeah. So to me, that was deeply satisfying. But it's a great tribute to, every one of us would tell you. It's like when you see a box turtle on a fence post, one thing you know for sure, he had help getting there. And I can tell you, especially for me, I'm only as good as the people that were around us. And that was one of those ideas that came up from our team, and is something I'll always be proud of having been a small part of.
That's awesome. Thank you. Governor Daniels?
I think if I was to try to put drape one label around it, it would be upward mobility. We came at a time when Indiana and the rest of what was then called the Rust Belt had been sliding. Wasn't anybody's fault necessarily. The manufacturing jobs had gotten fewer, and some had migrated already. And so the central objective we had, when I talked about why, the single transcendent one was to try to once again make Indiana a place of promise and prosperity. And a lot of things went into that, from a better tax structure. I always said we got to build the best sandbox in America, and people will come here and invest with us and not somewhere else. So everything we did, I still remember in the time between election and inauguration, I got a first probably 150 of those suckers. I mean, those public-spirited people who agreed to join us, and in a room, and I said, now look, every great enterprise I ever saw, every business, every great endeavor had a clear purpose. People knew what it was. It was on the wall. It was on the ID card, annual report if there was one. And everybody, moreover, was excited about that, and they knew what their role in delivering that was. And if the place had its act together, it was constantly checking and measuring and so forth. And I said, okay, look, here's ours. We're here to raise the disposable income of Hoosiers. I don't care where you're working. I don't care what your assignment is. We're going to figure out what you can do or do better or maybe stop doing in your corner of state government that makes that more likely. And we did that every day of 8 years. Everything, I don't care what you name, it always had that objective, from tax policy to infrastructure building to a more fair and quick and predictable regulatory process, and to trying to improve the educational results of our young people. And that was what it was all about. It was always, I always said, we're never going to let anybody talk about the haves and have-nots. No. It's the haves and the yet-to-haves. And we're here to work on behalf of the yet-to-haves, so that no matter where that community is, where that person is, they've got a better chance in life when we're done than they had when we got here. And that was what we were about.
It's awesome. So just a little inside baseball. I worked for all three of these former governors as agency head, and they always pulled us together as agency heads and laid out a vision, a strong vision, and we marched along right beside them. And so fun to hear some of these tonight. Senator Bayh, how about you?
Well, what three great governors to follow. First, just a 15-second digression. I want to follow Mike's comments in thanking all of you for being such staunch supporters of the State Fair. I have memories of this place going back to when I was a boy and my parents first bringing me here. But I was delighted to get the invitation, and I was amused, though, when they informed me that they were inviting every living governor. And I said, well, that's nice, but if you want a big crowd, let's get a couple of the deceased to attend. We can really turn them out for that. But, and then I ran into somebody, I was looking down the list here, and I realized that although I think Mitch may be the most senior among us, I think I'm second, in terms of longevity, I served the longest time ago, from 1988 to 1996, or January 97. And now a number of people are getting on. They don't remember those years quite so well. So I was introduced as governor by someone, and they said, well, when did you serve as governor? And I said, well, that was back in the Pleistocene era, when mastodons and woolly mammoths and saber-toothed tigers and even Democratic governors existed here in Indiana. Not so much today. But, so I'm a little long in the tooth, but to get to your question, I think the one thing you'll see common among all of us, regardless of, partisan, political affiliation or anything like that, is we believe in the basics. You make sure the budget is balanced. You can't run up big debts that you got to pay someday. You try and keep taxes modest because we believe in freedom. You should be able to keep more of your hard-earned pay. And so I was proud of the fact we reduced the auto excise tax during my term as governor. We did leave a sizable surplus at the end of my time. Job growth was good, which of course is the engine that drives everything else. And all of us, believe in those things. But if I just had to pick one thing, and there's something that Mike singled out when he was still in office, and Eric has carried it on along with the support of the General Assembly, and that's called the 21st Century Scholars Program, which I'm glad you're aware of it. I'm glad you're aware of it, because it makes me so proud when someone will occasionally come up and say that they're a 21st century scholar. For those of you who don't know, it's a pledge to every 7th grader in the state whose family is of more modest economic means. If they'll do their part, they'll stay in school, they'll graduate with decent grades, they can't get involved with drugs or alcohol. At least one parent has to sign the pledge, and the reason we did that is that the studies showed that the most important predictor of academic success is parental involvement. If you can get at least one parent, preferably two, applaud yourself. It makes a critical difference. Young boy or girl see that mom and dad care about this, and they pick up on that. And so we wanted at least one parent involved. It used to be very touching. Occasionally, a parent would send me a letter with their child's report card. And they'd say, you can see Sally's doing fine in math and English, but needs to do a little bit better in science, and it was just very touching. So now, I think upwards of 100,000 students across our state have been able to go and get a college education because of that effort, and that will mean that they'll be better taxpayers, better citizens, and it'll just help our state all the way around. Now, you asked about a story about how we get that done. I did have 20 seconds on that, and I think my colleagues here will appreciate this. So I propose the 21st Century Scholars Program, and to say that some of the members of the General Assembly were underwhelmed would be an understatement. They said, he's 38 years old, what does he know? I could be governor better than him. So they were polite, but they had their own ideas, and I respected that. So I started calling them in, and I heard them out. I said, but this is going to be good for these kids, and it's going to be good for our state. And they would kind of nod politely. And I could sense that wasn't really getting the job done. So I tried a different approach. I started calling them in, and I'd explain the merits of the program to them. They'd say, yes, Governor, but we think that's fine, but we want to do our own thing. I said, you guys don't understand. These are 7th graders. You don't have to pony up the money for 8 years. You can run for re-election 4 times before you got to fund this thing. Suddenly the light switch went off. They said, this is a great idea. Where do we sign up? And it passed overwhelmingly on a bipartisan basis. So.
Oh, that's that's amazing. Thank you all for what you're doing for Indiana and what you've done for Indiana. Now we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, and I think to some of you as well. We're going to talk about my favorite subject, the Indiana State Fair. And it's only appropriate we start with food. Governor Holcomb. During the Indiana State Fair in 2024, I have seen you eat 5 corn dogs, 3 lemon shake-ups, 2 orders of poutine fries. Is that right? Am I close to what
Glad
you
you're not stalking me. I've eaten a lot more than that.
Favorite fair food?
Corn dogs the size of my forearm.
I know. Gosh, love ya. Okay, so how about this? Favorite memory inside the Coliseum, and it has to do with a basketball. Governor, do you remember that?
I'm the youngest on the stage. Of course I remember that. Yeah, we watched March Madness in the Coliseum, and that was something special. I mean, the competition between being sworn into office and watching basketball, I guarantee you, I've showed more people the pictures of the basketball games than me being sworn in. So that was very special.
Kind of a Cinderella story is the way I describe it, right? So, Vice President Pence, so you have an incredible story about this place. You want to share with the group?
So I was attending church at the Little Catholic Church, which is a block away from the governor's residence. And I saw this beautiful brunette with a guitar playing up front in the service. And I followed her out the back of the church and eventually got her phone number, and I called her up. And I said, hey, would you, like to get together maybe Thursday night? And she said, well, I'm watching my niece and nephew. We're going to go ice skating.
This wasn't last month, was it?
No. So, yeah, just checking. So, but she said, well, I'm going to take them ice skating, and she said, I don't know if you ice skate. And I said, what do you mean ice skate? That's my whole thing, totally. And so I figured I could lace them up. We came over to the Coliseum with her niece and nephew, and we skated out on the ice, and we skated in the front of a church about a year and a half later, and it's 39 years this summer. I've been married to this wonderful woman. But it all started here. It's very special to us.
Okay, this section is called Name the Governor Who, and it all has to do with State Fair. So, which one of you or your family won pets playing carnival games during the Indiana State Fair? Vice President Pence, didn't you win some goldfish at the Indiana
Some golf
State?
shirts?
Didn't you have a goldfish that you won at the Indiana State
Oh,
Fair?
no, I didn't hear you right. No, I've carried a lot of goldfish home from this place.
I think they had names.
And they really don't have a warranty on them. It's not a put down, but they really just don't last very long. But I've won more than a few.
I think you even told me in so the fair is in August, and I think it was December when you told me you still had those blank
Oh
goldfish.
gosh, when we were first married, there was a goldfish who would not die. And we moved to about 3 different places as newlyweds, and we just kept taking the goldfish, hoping that he would go to the great beyond, and he never would. But it all started with a ping pong at the Indiana State Fair.
See,
Thanks.
Danny Houston, it's all about the carnival games,
Thanks
right?
for reminding me. That's right, Danny.
Yeah. So another carnival story, there's urban legend that one of you tried in high school to beat the rope ladder in the carnival. And is that possibly true, Governor Daniels?
What do you mean tried?
Oh, boom, 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 right?
Yeah, I think that's right. That's right. You know, the other memory I have, I might be the only one who remembers this. There was a great game here we used to love to play in junior high and high school. It was called Spaceball. 2 opposing trampolines with nets around it. And there was like a basketball hoop, maybe 8-10 feet off. And the goal of the game was to, leap off the trampoline, throw the ball through, and your opponent couldn't block it. It was a great game. And then I'm sure the lawyers got involved, and no more Spaceball. Yeah, it was a lot more fun than the rope ladder.
Okay, now how about this? Whose wife, this is an easy one, whose wife could teach all the 4-H equestrian riders not only how to ride, but how to win and beat their competition?
Well, I've seen my wife do cutting. I've seen her instruct, and she's even taught me how to ride a horse. But yes, she's in it to win it and loves to ride with others.
And then which one of you made your wife go up in a hot air balloon opening morning of the fair?
Well, this is a bum rap.
I'm relieved. I thought you meant
Made her do it. Made her do it.
I may have suggested it would be an amusing thing to announce over the PA that Sherry was going to take the hot air balloon. I didn't imagine for a minute that she was actually going to do it. And I don't know, I think they came down. They didn't come down where they were supposed to, let me put it that way. And my stock was pretty low for the next, 5 years or so.
Was that the year they landed on 465?
Yeah, I think it might have been.
Okay, so which one of you, I would say, was a groupie and hung out backstage at a concert with his parents during the Indiana State Fair? Maybe last year, maybe this year?
Last year I did, and with my parents. My father is a pianist, and I took it for granted growing up, but I would fall asleep to my father playing Joplin and jazz and classical music, therapeutic as I look back on it. And Buddy Guy played here last year. It's been an annual deal, but I was able to join him and meet a living legend. Eric Clapton says he's the best guitarist on planet Earth. And to have a conversation was a little bit surreal to have thought about as a child, listening to my father play those famous songs on a grand piano, and then to meet him, and then did again this year. Took him some gifts from Indiana before he went on stage. You know, he's pretty loose when he gets that out on stage, and he may take a nip or two. So we've got some good Indiana products that he went home with this year.
Yep, okay. Thanks for sharing. All right. So this is an easy one too. Who raised two boys who loved attending the Indiana State Fair with their mom? And this was described to me as they would come in from the fair like covered in sweat and grime and great big smiles on their faces. Is that true?
That is absolutely true. Our boys loved the fair. Like their father, they enjoyed eating their way through the Indiana State Fair. My favorite has always been the roasting ear, dipped in the vat of butter with the butter kind of dripping down your face. And yeah, one of the more unfortunate political pictures I've seen was of John Kerry attempting to eat a corn dog once from maybe not the most flattering of angles. But it's something about Massachusetts liberals here in Indiana. Another time, I knew we were in trouble in 1988. I'm running for governor the first time, and the presidential nominee, Governor Dukakis from Massachusetts, comes out. He's asked about his ag program in Iowa, and he says, Belgian endive. I said, this is not going to go well. But in any event, we loved the state fair, and we never had those kind of problems. But yeah, our boys loved it, and Susan loved it, and we loved everything about it. Really, it was always one of the highlights of when you're a young child, what better activity is there?
Exactly. Well, I mean, you talked about this gentleman earlier. So Abraham Lincoln attended the Wisconsin State Fair, I mean, in 1857. If I was in charge then, I would have made sure it was the Indiana State Fair. But he recited the need for having fairs as gathering places for sharing knowledge, for exchanging ideas, best practices. So let's spring ahead 160 years later. Why do you believe the state fair is so important today?
I want this one because I got very strong views about this.
Yes.
I mean, obviously, historically, it was primarily about our fabulous agricultural sector. But for the last 20, 30 years, you know, the reason I've felt so strongly about it is this: I don't know another place where Hoosiers of every description come together in close quarters and maybe go away understanding each other a little bit better. You know, I loved the year that y'all came up with the fish pond, for example. I went over there that morning and here are all these kids from the neighborhood. Think where our fairgrounds is. We're not out in some remote area, as many states are. Right here in the middle of our biggest city. And young people who, you know, think milk comes from a grocery store. About what they know about it, you know, had never caught a fish in their life, you know, just exuberant about it. And I just think that's why it's become more and more and more important. And Evan said it so well. We got to work our way out eventually out of this fix we're in the country where people who disagree leap to the conclusion that the other party has got some kind of character flaw for the disagreement. But name another place where close to 1 million of our fellow citizens of every description come together, have fun together, try things they wouldn't otherwise have tried, and meet people they would never otherwise have met. That's why we've got to keep investing in this place and make this best state fair in America better every year.
I love that. Okay, so this is going to be your last question. Are there any pearls of wisdom and advice, and it's for all of you, any pearls of wisdom and advice that you would like to share with the next generation, the Hadleys, the 17-year-old 4-H'er, about leadership and any kind of inspiration you would like to share to them as they continue to grow and develop into the next generation of leaders? And Governor Holcomb.
Well, I think Harley was Exhibit A, B, and C, and that was probably true in the 1850s, certainly in the 1950s, and will, as Mitch just articulated, will be equally so in 2050. And when I think about what this place means and all the blue and gold corduroy coats that make their way through and that are here today, and the Harleys that are out there, if you find yourself in that next generation, and if you can find your purpose and align it with your passion, as it just sure sounded like Harley has, then nothing will stop you from achieving what you're set out to do. And I just hope that you decide to do it in Indiana. And this place is magnetic. And so the more children that we can get here, just getting them here is step one, but then attaching them to, as was just shared, the purpose of this place will be a better state for it.
Thank you.
I just say to any of the young people that I think every one of us would tell you it's very humbling for us to have had the opportunities to serve in the ways that we serve. And just be confident that it's going to be your turn one of these days. And for the 4-H'ers here particularly, and the excellence that is celebrated and rewarded here, from the artists to livestock to literally all the wonderful competitions and interaction that Mitch just described so eloquently. What you're really doing is, it seems to me, this state fair is about raising up leaders. I mean, it's been doing it for generations, and it's doing it today. And I would just encourage you to really do two things. Number one is have faith in what you're learning in 4-H. These are not cliches. A commitment to being men and women of integrity, being people of character, treating others the way you want to be treated, making a commitment to excellence. These literally are the foundations of a life of consequence and impact and opportunity. And the other thing is for me, is just have faith that, like I said earlier, I believe that leadership is a calling that God places in the hearts of men and women. And just step into that call with faith and know that as you step forward, and there will be lessons learned along the way. Some of us have learned more lessons than others along the way. But as you step forward with faith in Him and faith in the people of the greatest state in the United States of America, your future is bright, and everything you're learning here is going to be for your good and the benefit of the people of Indiana and America. So God bless you.
Well, I have been asked, feels like 1,000,000 times, for that magic one-liner. I've never been able to do better than to say to young people, first and foremost, try to be a person people can trust. And a lot goes into that, but that's not a bad start, seems to me. I wouldn't want this to be read in a negative way. I actually think it is a more of an optimistic statement. But I've been telling young audiences now for 2 or 3 years at least that because of the shortcomings of their elders, I think it is highly, highly likely that one of those crises that comes to any country and has come to ours at different times in the past, our revolution, Civil War, the Depression, all that. I believe that this generation of young people is going to be the one that has to deal with that. And the success of, if you look at history, the failure or success of the civilizations that have gone before us has been the way they handled the great crisis when it arrived. And I think that today's young people, it's more likely than not, will be in their leadership years when that happens. It could be of domestic origin, our debts, our economy, could be of international origin. But you have to be blind to history not to realize that this does happen, some believe cyclically, every so many decades. And that's a huge opportunity. And like Mike, the young people, and I got to meet so many of them in the job we had and in the 10 years at one of our great universities, they're going to be up to it. And they're going to do, in some ways, I think, a better job than some of their predecessors did. And they're going to get a chance at greatness. That's when greatness is actually defined, when we read the history like Evan and I, we all do. And I do think today's young people are going to be at the plate when history throws the United States its next curveball. And I got every confidence that they'll hit it out of the park.
Awesome. Thank you. Senator Bayh.
I have the privilege of spending a lot of time these days focusing on what's going on in China and Russia and Iran and Venezuela and some of those places with regard to a commission I serve on involving the national intelligence services here in our country. And the reason I mention all that is I think our children's generation is going to be shaped by a global contest that is taking place now as we're gathering here. And very simply put, it's going to be this contest and the struggle between autocracy and dictatorship that those countries represent, and freedom and liberty that the United States of America and our allies represent. Living in a dictatorship is in some ways fairly simple. You're in service to the country. You have no rights, no liberties. You're disposable by the rule of the tyrant. Individual freedom does not matter. You just do what you're told. Living in a democracy is hard. It's difficult. It's more complicated. It's all about our individual freedom and what the government can occasionally do to empower us to achieve our own full potential as individuals. That's why we rebelled against the king way back when. So that's the first thing I would say to the next generation is stand for freedom, because no one is happier. You can write this down. No one is happier than the Chinese and the Russians and the Iranians and those folks than when we are fighting amongst ourselves. They cannot possibly defeat the United States of America. It is possible that we could defeat ourselves. I'm not predicting that. So that's number one. Freedom versus autocracy and tyranny. Stand for freedom. And how do you do that? How do we reinvigorate and reanimate our democracy? It gets back to understanding that the genius of our democracy is not like in some of these other countries. We're not all alike. We don't look alike. We don't worship alike. We don't think alike. But we reconcile those differences in the crucible of our democracy to find common ground together. Because united we stand, there's really very little that we cannot do. And so that would be the second message I give to the next generation is, in the words of my grandfather, Colonel Bayh, he served in the Second World War and the First World War, actually. First athletic director at Indiana State University. Way back, he met his wife, my grandmother, when it was called Indiana Normal, way back in the day. he had a great saying I'm fond of. He said, matter of fact, he's the most famous, or I should say, in the Hoosier hierarchy, he achieved the highest status. And it's not senator or governor. My grandfather is in the Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame. How about that? Now, it says a referee, but it still counts. So, in any event, he had a saying I'm fond of. He said, nobody ever learned anything by talking, but you can learn a lot by listening. So maybe it would behoove all of us to maybe listen to one another a little bit more and understand that we've got a lot more in common than some folks would like us to believe. And the final thing I'll say is, and I'm going to associate myself with everything that my colleagues said, and particularly what Mitch and Mike said here at the end, and that is, what is this place all about? As I mentioned, I was born on our family farm in Cherokseeville, Indiana. And you can't talk to too many Hoosiers who aren't 1 or 2 generations removed from the family farm. That's in our DNA. This fair and that agricultural heritage is part of the fabric that unites us as Hoosiers. But even more than that, it's the values that you learn in that kind of setting. Hard work, ingenuity, thrift, being a good neighbor, Mike being devout, being patriotic, those sorts of core American and Indiana values, that's really what this fair is all about. And I would say to the next generation, as long as you stay true to those things, well, the future is going to be mighty bright indeed.
Well, governors, you have certainly given us a great honor and a privilege to have all 4 living governors here with us tonight, and we've got a little present for each one of you as our thanks. And here in on the dirt, we give out purple and gold banners, so each of you are getting your own grand champion banners tonight. So Governor Holcomb, Vice President Pence, you got to unwind these for us. Governor Daniels.
I was hoping it was a fried Oreo.
Yeah, you got to wait for that. Go get your fare bucks, and thank you so much for being here. So governors, can you stand and show everybody your banners? Ladies and gentlemen, let's thank these incredible leaders who have joined us tonight for the art of leadership. Thank you all so much for being here. We appreciate you spending time with us tonight, and go out and have a great time at your Indiana State Fair.